Story 1. You mostly had to be in a certain place at a certain time to do something. Work was at the workplace. School was at school. Television was at home. Media you did not own was at the store, waiting for someone to buy it. Your group of friends was where you hung out. All the realms are muddled now, and we are more isolated despite the appearance of connectivity. So life as a human feels harder even with conveniences, access, and abundance. I fear we have created a world for which we were not created. Story 2. Renting a house with several other people and paying $150 per month in rent while earning about $10 an hour in a full-time job. Story 3. 26-episode seasons of television shows, especially science fiction. Movies that could not rely on computer-generated imagery for everything. Hand-drawn and painted cell animation. The world and politics before social media. An era of technology when anything seemed possible. Companies took risks and employed people, and economic activity was not concentrated in a few too-big-to-fail corporations. Personal privacy. Story 4. Before smartphones, everyone had to talk to each other. It was kind of nice. Story 5. The mall was a hangout location. I felt a sense of optimism. The music played. Story 6. Lane Staley of Alice in Chains was a great singer. I still listen to Alice in Chains Unplugged today. Rest in peace, Lane Staley. Story 7. Freedom to walk to airport gates to greet or say farewell to loved ones. Story 8. I would say the 1990s were the last decade for really good music. Story 9. My blissful ignorance of the real world and jelly shoes, which are uncomfortable but cool. Story 10. My youthful years were pain-free and full of good times without social media. Story 11. Making $20 per hour and being able to pay my rent for a 3-bedroom house and all expenses, including my car, in less than a week of work. Story 12. You could go out for the night on £10 or have a banger on £20. Story 13. I miss being middle-aged. I was in my 40s during the 1990s. Story 14. Before September 11, 2001, there was a sense of optimism and a lack of paranoia. It is hard to describe. Story 15. The music scene had its last good decade, offering a decent variety. I am not saying there is nothing good today, but much of it sounds derivative and ticket prices are high. Story 16. The music. How new and original grunge and modern rock was. Story 17. Optimism. People who hate fascists. Good music. Not knowing who Elon Musk was. Story 18. I really miss the vibe of the 1990s. The music, the cartoons, and how simple things felt. Even small things like making mixtapes, playing outside until dark, or blowing into Nintendo cartridges somehow made life more fun and memorable. Those little moments stick with you. Story 19. I really miss how going online was a deliberate task. You had to sit at the computer, dial up, and wait for pages to load. I was not connected to the world around the clock by a supercomputer in my pocket. Story 20. Buying front-row concert tickets at face value when they go on sale. Waiting in line at the box office on the phone or elsewhere. Story 21. The joy of the inevitable seed explosion that blew the burning bits from my $5 bag of weed all over my new neon-colored windbreaker and melted tiny holes in it. Story 22. Leaving the house and being unreachable, then returning home to listen to voicemail. Story 23. 1. Asking my parents for $1 so I could walk to the gas station and buy 2 bags of candy. Dos kaki cargopans. 3. The world before the war on terror. Story 24. I wasn't born in the 90s, when you could walk the streets without feeling like someone might want to kill you for no reason. Story 25. Music, no responsibilities, traveling, college life, and partying without cameras everywhere. Laughing out loud. Story 26. I miss video games that were released finished and did not require updates. I also miss single-player games that told a good story. There were many more of those in the 90s than there are now. Story 27. Privacy. Not knowing where someone is or what they are up to until you get home and find they have left a message. Story 28. You can be unreachable for long periods during the day. No one spams you with irrelevant shared posts. No colleagues or managers ask unnecessary questions. No annoying notifications from applications. You can mute notifications, but sometimes you need certain notifications, and some applications do not allow you to selectively turn off specific types. Story 29. Awareness of how many things were awful in the 1990s. The 1990s were very bigoted, with high crime and pollution, more war than people can imagine today, and several major domestic terrorist attacks. But as a child you were unaware. Story 30. It was considered totally unacceptable to vote for the far right. That was a line that fewer than 5% of the population would cross, due to a combination of a large number of the World War II generation still being alive and the absence of the internet and social media to spread toxic ideas. Story 31. The ability to be disconnected does not exist in today's world. Story 32. Blockbuster, arcades, movie theaters, amusement parks. Story 33. Perks include toys and cereal, free t-shirts with a pack of cigarettes, every 10th subscription free, and so on. Story 34. I loved the freedom of having a bike, being unreachable, and doing whatever I wanted as long as I was home at or shortly after dark. I also spent hours building endless tree forts in the woods behind my house with neighborhood friends. You would be amazed at what a bored kid with a bunch of spare lumber, a hammer, and a box of nails can build. Story 35. Everything was better. I wish I could raise my child in the 90s. Story 36. My mother is still alive but clearly getting older. When I was a small boy, she was a superhero, my Wonder Woman. Now I wonder how she did it without breaking. Story 37. Physical buttons and overall quality in cars. My 1996 Toyota Camry was a tank. Casual family restaurants like Bennigan's. Good network television. Being able to attend a concert at a reasonable price. You did not pay over $100 unless you were down front. Story 38. I was lucky to grow up without a cell phone or the internet. It allowed me to go outside, not be expected to do everything instantly, and kept my media consumption to a few hours of television a day, mostly cartoons or sitcoms. Story 39. Nirvana, Alice in Chains, Smashing Pumpkins, Jane's Addiction, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Rage Against the Machine, and the Pixies were all in their prime in the early 1990s. Story 40. Disappearing into the Delta in eastern Washington with my friends for a couple of days without phones. Campfires, playing in the rivers, seeing what happened, and dropping off the map for a weekend without a care in the world. Story 41. You did not know what was happening in the world until you sat down and watched the news at 6 in the evening or 9 in the evening. If you missed it, you had to wait until the next day. Story 42. Not having cell phones. Trips to Blockbuster to pick out a movie made the whole ritual more special. Story 43. I was born in 2000, but I miss seeing more cars from the 1990s or earlier. Story 44. Anticipation has become rare. Everything is so immediate that events rarely have time to build and create genuine expectation. Even when you are waiting for something, a billion distractions temper real excitement. Life moves too fast. There is no time to savor or enjoy anything. Story 45. September and October are actually cool, not just a slightly less blazing extension of summer. Story 46. I miss knowing that the stupidity of the 1980s was behind us and the unfamiliarity with smartphones and social media. Story 47. Eye contact. I grew up in the 90s, so the phone culture never really stuck with me the same way it did for younger generations. Over the last handful of years, I have felt almost awkward walking around or even sitting without my phone out, seeing everyone's faces buried in screens. I feel like the odd one out. It has led me to question my confidence in introductions and when to turn on my social filter. I am not a fan of the feeling. Story 48. I used to like mainstream popular music. Now I feel like a loner listening to underground indie music that no one has heard of because I never adapted to the mumbled, auto-tune music craze that has dominated the past decade and beyond. Story 49. If I could get Uncle Rico's time machine to work, I'd go back to 1990 and live that decade again. But I can't because that machine is a piece of crap. Story 50. Common sense and the illusion that the world was getting better. Story 51. Aside from cheaper rent, there used to be really good original local bands. Now they are all just jam bands that play covers of material by other people. I cannot stand cover bands. It is like going to see Star Wars and watching amateurs act out the movie scenes. Story 52. Happy Meals used to cost $2. They included a real toy and the box was fun. Story 53. I can relax knowing someone in Washington, District of Columbia, is an adult and will try to fix problems. We had a budget surplus under President Clinton, not a $3 trillion debt. Story 54. Oddly specific, but Pizza Hut commercials, especially around Halloween, make me laugh out loud. Story 55. Wild nights out with no photographic evidence. Banter without offending anyone. No hangovers because I was young. Low property prices. My parents were young and healthy. The internet was new and amazing. Living without labels. Story 56. Not even caring about politics. Less responsibility. Everything that does not hurt. Story 57. Charles Barkley on the Suns and a new Pavement album every couple of years. Story 58. Politicians stayed in politics and avoided Hollywood. Actors refrained from speaking about politics. Story 59. Peace. It was not great, but nowhere near what we are dealing with in today's world. Story 60. A yellowish hue to the world, with a hazy atmosphere from incandescent bulbs and cigarette smoke. Story 61. Wealth, prosperity, and never having heard of September 11th. What a fun era. The Clinton years were awesome. Story 62. I miss waking up on Saturday mornings to sit on the sofa with my stinky old cat and watch the newest Pokemon episodes on Kids Warner Brothers. Story 63. Property prices, the income to cost of living ratio, politics, and the economy. Story 64. Have real relationships with people instead of relying on social media and texting. Story 65. Nothing. I was poor in the 1990s. The 1990s can kiss my ass. Story 66. Spontaneous erections. Shut up, we all get old, damn it. Story 67. I used to drive from Missouri with my family as a child to Florida to spend 2 weeks with my grandfather every summer. It was a different kind of place to vacation in 1990. Story 68. Prices used to be lower. Now prices are higher while companies are making billions in profits. Story 69. My hairline has receded. Going from a normal forehead to a very high forehead has been difficult. Story 70. I miss the person I was before the relationship I should have avoided but allowed to continue for 2 years. It started in 1999. Story 71. I feel hope and excitement about my future, not in a doom and gloom way. Life looks different at 20 compared to 50. My first mortgage was $450 per month, but my first job in my chosen field after college paid $9 per hour. There were no smartphones. I sometimes wish they had never been invented. Cell phones were fine and even texting was okay. They should have stopped there. We still have malls, but the vibe is not the same. Story 72. The job market changed during the dot-com boom, which caused a significant economic expansion for a while. Story 73. The Cold War had ended, so we were under the blissful belief that few geopolitical problems remained, apart from sporadic terrorism. Story 74. The idea that selling out was soulless, shabby chic, Generation X authenticity, rock that is relevant. No smartphones. No cold civil war. Story 75. The idea that people would be more enlightened in the future and that digital technology would improve your life rather than serve as a Trojan horse for the worst aspects of capitalism. Story 76. Showing up at a friend's house and creating unplanned fun. Everyone was comfortable with people dropping by. Story 77. Real conversations and hanging out. Felt like there was much more real living. We got together and socialized. Neighbors all knew each other. We did not expect to pick up something and be amused. We had to amuse ourselves and our friends. My mom was still here. That is what I miss most. Besides the conversations, it was so nice to know I could and would go home. I really miss that. Story 78. There was an era of technology when anything was possible. Companies took risks, businesses employed people, and it was not controlled by a few too-big-to-fail corporations. Bring back clear electronics. I want to see the innards. Story 79. I did not pay bills when I was a child. I was stressed about money in general. Story 80. Vicente Sabatini's soap operas aired on television, and the next day you had to go to school. Story 81. I remember my grandfather's answer to all my wild questions as a kid. I don't know. Today, a quick search on the iPhone gives all the answers. I kind of liked it when we just didn't know. Story 82. Cell phones were not as commonplace. The 1990s were a transitional period when more people were getting cell phones, but not everyone had one. They were mostly carried by people in high-powered professions who needed to be reached at a moment's notice. Now, because of changes over the past 25 years, everyone from children as young as 7 to seniors in their 80s has a phone. Lines between work and personal life have blurred, and more people in many professions answer work correspondence off the clock because this has gradually become normal. In the 1990s, in most jobs, if your boss called you at home on a Wednesday night at 7, let alone on a Saturday, there had to be a serious emergency. Story 83. I recently visited Las Vegas. It was cool and fun, but it was much better in the mid-1990s. Story 84. Not paying taxes or bills. Friends not dying from driving under the influence or drug overdoses. Story 85. A better time when everything in film, music, and television was good. Story 86. Having hair in the proper places, on the top of the head rather than on the body. Story 87. Life without social media. You can only be contacted in person or by a landline call. Story 88. Mostly my hair. Beyond that, I miss being able to talk to a friend in person. A quick phone call to make plans, then head out. Story 89. We lived mostly free in the world before September 11th, 2001. People who were not there do not understand just how much we lost after that. Story 90. Social media has some positives, but I was happier when I did not know the worst political opinions some of my friends held. Story 91. Porn in the 1990s was sexy and hot. Plastic surgery had not yet taken over, so some women still looked real. Choking had not become common and was not considered disgusting yet. Story 92. Being in my 30s and watching my kids learn to walk and ride a bike. Story 93. Hand-drawn signs for college parties and bands. Carrying compact discs in a suitcase and making crucial decisions when road tripping. Be kind. Rewind. Conversations with sales clerks while checking out. Going to a mall. Shopping and finding things you need or want. Discovering other items. Touching them and trying them on to see if you like the feel. And sitting in a food court while waiting for friends. Calling and checking messages on the answering machine. Friday nights were for pizza, visiting the video store, and family time. The television guide was crucial for planning Christmas television. Story 94. Hip-hop. Cypress Hill, Souls of Mischief, Wu-Tang Clan, Fump Dubiest, The Far Side, A Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul. Yo! Music, television, raps. The John Peel Show on BBC Radio 1. Grunge and the thriving, high-quality alternative rock scene. Some of Britpop. Much of it was poor. The Word and Games Master on Channel 4. The acid house and hard techno club scenes. Music festivals were better. They stayed in their lanes and were less corporate, so they felt more authentic. Dunnington focused on metal. Reading and later Leeds were generally broader rock and indie festivals, as was Tea in the Park. The 4-day Phoenix Festival was the best of them all, with amazing lineups. I also miss a time when cocaine was seen as a hard drug like heroin, and pubs and clubs were not full of people under its influence. Video game arcades were full of games and pinball machines in the early 1990s rather than ticket redemption machines. Football was better when teams played the 4-4-2 formation rather than tedious possession football. There was no video assistant referee, and you could commit fouls without being sent off. Influencers did not exist. You could buy or copy a computer game without in-game additional purchases. Story 95. I would relive the 10-year loop for the rest of my days. Story 96. Bill Clinton had policies I strongly disagreed with, but he brought out votes for the Democrats. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.